Renolin Pillay, a marketing professional, passionate people person, and someone whose life is a testament to choosing what's possible. Born with cerebral palsy, Renolin has never allowed his circumstances to define his future. Instead, he's built his life around resilience, purpose, faith, and the belief that people should be recognized for their abilities and not their disabilities. His mindset has helped him overcome challenges, pursue ambitious goals, and inspire others to believe in themselves. He is also someone who values quality time with family and friends, has a deep love for animals, finds peace in nature, and is known for his quick wit, dry sense of humor, and the occasional dose of sarcasm. He's also a lifelong car enthusiast, a BMW fan at heart. Renolin appreciates any well maintained car and believes each one has its own personality. For Nolan, success isn't measured by titles or achievements. It's the dream of coming home to a happy family surrounded by nature in a quiet wooden cabin overlooking a lake. A simple vision that reminds us that sometimes the richest life is also the simplest. Hi, I'm Sanchia Vandayar, and this is episode 7 of Choosing What's Possible with Renolin. Hi, Renolin. You've achieved goals some people walk away from. What was your motivation to set goals from a young age, and what is your system for resilience when something feels impossible?
I've been fortunate to grow up surrounded by positive, ambitious people. Whether it was my family or close friends, they've always believed that I could achieve more than I believed I could myself. They've constantly reminded me to never give up, and as a child, those messages become part of who you are. Growing up, I could already see the difference between people who lived with purpose and people who just simply let life happen to them. People who had goals seemed to have direction, and that message stayed with me. I also attended the Brown School from 1998 to 2007, and that's where the foundation was really laid. It taught me the value of setting small goals, achieving them, and then setting the next one. I remember physiotherapy sessions where the goal might simply be to stretch my arm a little bit further than I could the week before. The next session, I would just try to go a little bit further than that. Looking back, I realized that those weren't just physical exercises, they were lessons on how to approach life. Big achievements are usually the result of small victories repeated over time. As I got older, I realized that if you want to live a meaningful life, you need to know what you're aiming towards. You don't necessarily have to have it all figured out, but you should have a sense of the person you are trying to become. Goals give your life direction. I've also always been curious about my own potential. I've never wanted cerebral palsy to decide what I could and couldn't do. My motivation has never really been about proving other people wrong. It's always been about proving to myself that I'm capable of more than I thought yesterday. Living on my own for the past 4 years has reinforced that. I've surprised myself more times than I can count. It taught me that confidence doesn't come before you try, it comes because you try. Every time you step into something uncomfortable, you discover that you are capable of more than you realized. When something feels impossible, I remind myself that impossible usually just means I haven't found my way around it yet. My job isn't to have all the answers. My job is to simply take the next step. It doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have to look like anyone else's journey. I've also learned that resilience isn't doing everything on your own. I'm comfortable to ask for help because I know that people can often see possibilities that I can't. I try to speak to myself with kindness, especially during difficult seasons, because the voice you listen to the most is usually your own. Above all, I pray. My faith reminds me that I'm never carrying life's challenges by myself. And knowing that there are people out there that believe in me, encourage me, and maybe even draw hope and inspiration from my journey gives me another reason to keep going. Sometimes resilience isn't about finding more strength, it's about remembering why you started in the first place.
Cerebral palsy could mean you've had to problem solve your body from a very young age. How has that trained you to problem solve in all aspects of your life differently than others in becoming everything you came here to be?
Absolutely. I think one of the greatest things that cerebral palsy has taught me is to focus on what's possible. From a very young age, I've learned to ask, how can I make this work? Instead of, why can't I? That way of thinking has shaped far more than just my body. It has shaped how I approach life. One belief I've always held on to is that people should be recognized for their abilities rather than their disabilities. That's something I've carried with me throughout my life. I've never wanted cerebral palsy to be the headline of my story. Growing up, I was fortunate enough to have supportive parents. Help was always there if I needed it. But I was also encouraged, especially at school, to try new things for myself. Looking back, I'm extremely grateful for that because it taught me to become resourceful instead of being dependent on others. Over the years, I've realized that there's almost always other ways of doing things. Sometimes it takes creativity, sometimes a little bit of research, and sometimes it just means willing to try things a bit differently. Take something as simple as shoes. I wear slip ons because laces are often difficult for me, or my love for cars. When I got my first car, we modified it with a push button start, which I thought was the coolest thing ever at the time, and we moved the indicator to the left hand side. Today, when I'm looking for a car, those aren't luxury features. They're practical solutions which allow me to enjoy something that I'm generally passionate about. I've also learned that there's no prize for making life harder than it needs to be. When I bought my first flat in 2021, one of my biggest considerations was finding a place on ground level with little to no stairs. Could I have managed somewhere else? Possibly. But if I can make my life a little bit easier and reduce unnecessary risks, why wouldn't I? One of my favorite examples is making a sandwich. I only made my first sandwich at the age of 27 because using a knife is quite a challenge for me. After a bit of trial and error, I discovered a pizza cutter works perfectly. So, yes, I use a pizza cutter specifically for making sandwiches. I get a few laughs, but it works. Even ironing is a bit unconventional. I don't use an ironing board. I iron on my bed. It takes me a bit longer, and sometimes there are still a bit of creases, but I'm proud because I did it myself. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to work for me. Those experiences have shaped the way I solve problems in every area of my life. Whether it's my career, relationships, or everyday challenges, my first instinct is to look for a solution rather than dwell on the obstacle. Cerebral palsy has taught me to adapt, be patient, and to think creatively. Those lessons have become some of my greatest strengths. I'm incredibly grateful for the people who help me, and I'll never be too proud to ask for any support when I need it. But I also value my independence because every time I try to figure out something for myself, it reminds me that I'm capable. At the end of the day, I don't want to be remembered for what I could do or what I couldn't do physically. I want to be remembered for the way I think, the empathy I show, the encouragement I give, and for the way I make people feel. For me, that's where my real ability lies.
When you lead yourself in your everyday, what's one assumption people make about you that you love proving wrong?
I've never been interested in proving other people wrong. People will always make assumptions based on what they know or what they've been exposed to. They only understand things at the level they've experienced, and that's okay. I can't control what people assume about me, but I can control how I respond. One assumption I've experienced quite often is just because somebody is physically differently abled, that must mean that they're limited in other ways as well, sometimes even intellectually. I don't take offense to it because I genuinely believe that people aren't trying to be disrespectful. They just simply haven't had the chance to understand disability. A good example is when I'm out at a restaurant with my family. Every now and again, the waiter would look at my dad and ask him what I wanted to order, assuming that I couldn't speak for myself. Then I'll answer the question, and you can almost see the look of surprise on their face. It's one of those moments that quietly changes somebody's perspective. I actually welcome conversations. If someone has a genuine question, I'd much rather they ask me instead of make assumptions. That's how we learn from one another. And if I can help somebody understand disability a little bit better, I'm always happy to do that. Sometimes I even have a little bit of fun with it. So, cerebral palsy can present physically like somebody who had a stroke. So, one day at the gym, a lady randomly came up to me and asked, "Did you have a stroke?" I just smiled and said yes, and simply carried on with my workout. Looking back, I should have explained myself, but in the moment, I found it quite funny. Over the years, people have underestimated what I could do. Whether it's driving, living on my own, building a career, or even winning a swimming championship. There've always been assumptions. I've never done things to prove anyone wrong. I've always done them to prove to myself that I'm capable. I've realized that I don't have to convince people of anything. I just have to believe in myself, keep showing up, and keep living my life. Over time, people stop seeing disability first and start seeing the person. If that changes somebody's perspective along the way, then that's a bonus.
If your younger self, who was just diagnosed, could see you now, following your holy heart desires and hitting goals, what's the one sentence you'd tell him about what's possible?
Never underestimate what you're capable of. Believe in yourself, trust God, and you'll find a way through more than you ever thought was
A
possible.
common phrase I often hear is, don't give up. What was the one moment you almost did, and what specific thought or person pulled you back to your belief in yourself?
Never give up has been my life's motto for as long as I can remember. It's something that's been instilled in me from a young age, and I genuinely believe that it's one of the reasons I've come this far. The reality is, life doesn't get easy as we get older. In many ways, it becomes much harder. Right now, one of my biggest challenges is finding stability in my career. If I'm being honest, there are days where I feel like giving up. Those thoughts do come, and I think it's important to acknowledge that resilience isn't about never feeling discouraged, it's about deciding not to stay there. There are a few things that bring me back. The first is my younger brother. He looks up to me and reminds me that my actions matter. I want to be somebody who leads by example, somebody who stays consistent even on the days where it feels difficult. The second is the people I choose to surround myself with. I've learned that your environment shapes you. I choose to spend time with positive, encouraging people, and I've even become intentional about what I consume online. My social media is filled with people and messages to inspire me and keep me growing because what we feed our minds really matter. Above all, my faith in God keeps me grounded. Prayer has become my anchor, and it's taught me that what feels like a delay isn't a denial. We all have our own journey, and I've learned to trust that things will happen in God's timing and not necessarily mine. And since you're the one that asked the question, Sancha, I just want to say thank you. You've played a meaningful role in encouraging me to grow in my faith and be more intentional about building my relationship with God. I don't think you fully realize the impact it's had on me, but I'm genuinely grateful for it. The other thing that keeps me going is remembering why I started. I often speak about encouraging others, believing in yourself, and not giving up. If I walked away every time life got difficult, those would just be words. I want my life to reflect the message I share with other people. Finally, perspective has become really important for me. Even in difficult seasons, I can still find so much to be grateful for. When I focus on what's going well instead of what's missing, it reminds me that God has been faithful before and He'll definitely be faithful again. That's what gives me courage to keep moving forward.
Beyond your own goals, what do you want others who are facing invisible struggles to take from your story?
Beyond my own goals and achievements, I'd want to leave people with one simple belief: you matter. No matter what you're facing, your current circumstances don't have the final say over who you become. Every one of us is here for a purpose. We all have something meaningful to offer to the people around us, even if we can't see it ourselves yet. I know everyone's journey is different, and I could never understand what another person is going through. But I do know what it's like to face challenges, to question yourself, and to wonder if things will ever get better. That's why I encourage people to pray, be kind to themselves, and give themselves permission to start before they feel ready. You don't necessarily have to take a giant leap. Start small. One step at a time is still progress. Don't give up. Sometimes we spend too much of time focusing on what we don't have that we forget the gifts we do have. I've learned that life isn't about waiting for perfect circumstances. It's about making the most of what you've been given and trusting that God can do something meaningful with it. One message I would especially like to leave with the young men is this: don't suffer in silence. For a long time, we've been taught that true strength means carrying everything on our own, every burden on our own. I don't believe that's true. I think real strength is having the courage to speak up, ask for help, and let people walk alongside you. None of us were meant to do life alone. And finally, don't forget to enjoy the journey of life. Life isn't about Life isn't only about overcoming challenges or reaching the next goal. It's also appreciating the small victories, the people who walk beside you, and the moments that remind you that there's still so much to be grateful for. Life won't always get easier, but it does get better. Keep going. One day you look back and realize that everything that you thought that might break you was actually shaping the person you are becoming.
How would you define nothing is impossible based on walking your life's journey? And what would you say to parents who may be your parents right now?
To me, nothing is impossible starts with a decision to try. Every journey begins with that first step. If you have a vision and if you're willing to keep showing up, you'll always move forward. Success isn't always guaranteed, but growth is. Every challenge teaches you something, builds your character, and brings you closer to the person you are becoming. And to parents who may be where my parents once were, I would simply say thank you. Thank you for believing in your child before they believed in themselves, for every prayer, for every word of encouragement, and for celebrating every milestone, no matter how small. I know it's natural to want to protect your child. My parents certainly did. But one of the greatest gifts they have given me was eventually trusting me enough to let me try, to let me fail, and let me grow. Don't let your fear become your child's limitation. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for having the courage to let me go out into the world and make something of myself. I know it couldn't have been easy, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
How do you define the word beautiful, and when is something beautiful to you?
For me, beauty has very little to do with physical appearance. It's about how somebody makes me feel. If a person can be completely themselves and leave me feeling hopeful, peaceful, inspired, that's beautiful. I'm drawn to people who lead with kindness, compassion, integrity, and honesty. I also think there's something incredibly beautiful about someone who chooses to keep going, especially when life has given them every reason to give up. To me, one story and your character is more beautiful than anything physical. And I'd like to take this opportunity to say this to you as well, Sancha. One of the things I've always admired about you is your journey. Watching the person you've become and the way you continue to grow is a beautiful thing. It reminds me that growth is something worth celebrating. And I think that's one of the most beautiful qualities a person can have.
Thanks, Renolin, and thank you for listening.